Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel. Rezolve today is at $4.88, 88.5 cents technically, if we want to get technical here. The stock is up about 3.5%. That's actually a pretty strong move considering what's happening with the Russell today, considering the fear that's out there in singular stocks. And we'll talk about that in today's episode. We will get into the breaking news you need to know. I want to cover something that has people nervous, okay? There's more and more competition coming in agentic AI. But I want to give you my perspective on why I'm not worried about it and why it's actually probably a good thing, okay? Yeah, I know. Sounds crazy to hear. Hit the like button, subscribe to the channel. Don't worry, we'll get into all of this information. If you guys want to come join us in the trading community, check that link out down below. We're going much deeper than just Rezolve. We're looking for the next big winner, okay? In AI, robotics, quantum, energy, you get it. These fields are going to be here for the next 10 years. You want to be in the next big company before everyone else. Just that difference will change your life, okay? If you were buying Palantir at $10 like I did on IPO, right now, you'd be doing very well. Or the many other stocks that we have been first to, APLD, Nebius, even Rezolve in this case, okay? Navitas Semiconductor, we've been early. All of those stocks are up 5 to 10x from here, and that was in the last 12 months, okay? IONQ, you get the idea. Come join us if you guys would like to. But with that said, let's get into today's episode. Now, we talked about this in the prior video, so I don't want to spend too much time on it because we have a lot to cover. If you kind of want a broader, macro perspective on what's happening in this market, check out the last video that was posted, but I'll give you a brief rundown. So, as we talked about in the prior video, if you look at the VIX EQ, it surged today. Now, what is the VIX EQ? It's the CBOE S&P 500 Constituent Volatility Index, okay? Basically, in English, it's the VIX equal weight, okay? What does that mean? It's taking stocks and from an equal weight perspective in the S&P, okay, and showing you single stock volatility. How nervous is Wall Street about single stocks? Now, there is to some degree going to be some weighting in this because Mag 7, for an example, is like 30% of the S&P, a little bit more than that. So that's kind of going to dominate this index, okay? When you look at this over the past year, you're at about 60% or about 50% of the move you've seen in early April. So it's not like people are, jumping off a cliff fearful because a lion is chasing them, okay, to make a weird analogy. But people are edging closer to the cliff, okay, to keep with the weird analogy. People are kind of nervous right now, okay? And keep in mind, back in April, stocks fell 20%. So keep that in mind with the S&P at all-time highs. It's kind of unprecedented the amount of fear you have in single stocks right now versus the VIX, okay? So take a mental, okay, let me just do this for you, okay? Let's make this very, very easy. Like, nobody can mess this one up, okay? Let's look at the VIX, okay? Boom. Let's put these two side by side. I know I'm in a car and it's a little shaky right now, so bear with me, okay? Let's try not to close it out. Boom. I don't know how well you guys can see this, but look at the VIX, okay? The VIX is back to lows. Like, there is almost no fear at all in the headline S&P. People are generally not fearful right now. You're back to lows, okay? You are at a 0% retracement, unchanged. Well, you're actually lower than where you were before April, right? You are back to levels of fear you were at in February, right? February 2025. Markets were doing well. People really didn't care about tariffs. Like life was simple then, okay? Well, you're back to that level. Again, look in the right side of your screen. Look at equal weight volatility. It's very high. Very, very high relatively, okay, versus the VIX. Like, it's actually wild stocks are as high as they are with this kind of fear in single stocks. What this is showing you is what Wall Street is doing. They're going out and they're hedging their portfolios, okay? Because they're nervous about the single stock risk, they're nervous about earnings, okay? They're nervous about big tech earnings mostly. So the Russell was up 0.25% today. NASDAQ up almost 2%. Hedge funds and institutions, they want to have exposure to this market, but they also want to hedge because they're fearful. What does this mean in simple terms? Okay, they're going out and they're selling a stock like Rezolve. They're hedging in a stock like Rezolve. I'm just, again, picking on Rezolve because this video is about Rezolve. And that's keeping these Russell stocks at a suppressed level. The reason for this is because there's a higher beta. As we talked about before, if you're a fund, let's say a $10 billion fund, you wanted to hedge 10% of your portfolio, you wanted to hedge $1 billion, okay? You could short $1 billion of Apple if you wanted to, or you could short $300 million worth of Rezolve. Let's just assume Rezolve's beta's 3. That just means if the S&P goes down 1%, Rezolve on average is going to fall 3%. Okay, it's going to amplify what the S&P does by 3x. That's what you're seeing right now. People are nervous about Microsoft, Apple, Google earnings, but they're not necessarily going out and shorting those stocks. They're going out and shorting the rest of the market in case Apple, Google, and Amazon and Microsoft wet the bed. If those big tech names wet the bed, don't you think small caps are going to sell off a lot more? If something disrupts the AI story, small caps are going to sell off a lot more, right? Makes a ton of sense. This is what happens. This is Wall Street for you, okay? So considering the Russell 2000 is only up 0.25% and Rezolve up 3.5% at the time of recording this video, well, I'll take that any day of the week, okay? That's a win in my book for Rezolve. Now, from a technical perspective, Rezolve has also found some support around the 100-day moving average in recent days. It's started to climb higher again, okay? We do have a press release we're going to get into in just a moment, but first I want to address what a lot of people have been concerned about recently. We've talked about this in the trading community, and again, while I don't know exactly what's going to happen, I still offer my opinions, okay? There's something that was specifically talked about today. It says Google pushes standards for agentic AI commerce with AP2. From what I can gather from this is not necessarily Google is creating, agentic AI commerce. Now, I'm sure they're going to, okay? They do have a partnership with Rezolve, and we'll see how deep that partnership actually is. But it looks like more of like the two-factor authentication process, okay? So Google is partnered with 60 different companies like Visa, MasterCard, PayPal, all of these merchants to create this authentication process, likely to prevent a disaster in agentic AI, okay? So it's like, again, if you're a business and you accept Visa and MasterCard, right? Well, you don't own the credit card companies. You partner with the credit card companies and they handle the back end. It seems like with agentic AI, Rezolve is really the front man here, like the agents, the checkout process. But once people actually hit the checkout button, it's not necessarily Rezolve anymore, okay? Depending on what they pay with, it's going to be a credit card. Rezolve would have to obviously authenticate that with like a Visa or a MasterCard. And Google is creating these standards with their AP2 solutions. So this is my best understanding of the situation. It's not Google trying to go after the agentic AI, market. Sorry if I'm screaming a little bit here. My ears are like kind of poppy. We're in, I think, Kentucky at this point. I don't even know. But yeah, it's kind of hard to hear myself even speak. But you get the idea, okay? Hopefully that makes some sense. Now, if you just look at Google, okay, or literally look at like Google search, okay? I put in Google Agentic Commerce AI News. Pretty generic, basic terminology. There's an article from 6 hours ago that says how agentic AI will change commerce as we know it. says Google's Agentic RAG redefines e-commerce personalization. Visa and MasterCard both launching new Agentic AI payments tools. Okay, what I'm trying to point out here is there is a massive market for Agentic AI commerce. Every store, both physical and retail, have a use case for Agentic AI. Okay, there's going to be many different players in this. The market is far large enough for all of them. But for there to be a market, there has to be competition for a market. Okay? That's just how these things work. So there will be competition, and it's actually a good thing. You want people competing for each other's business. You want, innovation and things to go right with Agentic AI. Now, I think as more and more of Wall Street obviously catches on to the opportunity with Agentic AI, which they have not done so yet, hence Rezolve would be a lot higher than where it is today, you're going to see more partnership opportunities open up. You're going to see even a potential buyout situation of Rezolve. With the kind of valuation Rezolve has, I'm hopeful that they will not accept a buyout. Shareholders would have to approve of that. Dan Wagner owns like 30% of shares, so he would likely have the final say. But it even makes Rezolve a pretty compelling acquisition, especially considering Rezolve is acquiring all of these smaller companies that helps kind of build the software stack. But again, even from a Wall Street perspective, more and more people are starting to talk about Agentic AI. Okay, there's more companies starting to focus on this. Wall Street has not really talked about this yet. I look on CNBC every single day for people talking about Agentic AI. I've come across one video in the past months, okay? This is something we're very early to. And you have to accept that, when a stock like Rezolve is doing really well, when retail mainly is hyped about a stock, people are not going to have fears at all, okay? When the stock comes down, starts not doing as well, largely because of broader market factors, people's fear levels are going to rise. And that's where you make the money, okay? Again, we don't want to invest in the hypiest stocks. We want to invest in the stocks that Wall Street is overlooking, and Rezolve, by that definition, is overlooking it. Now, it's kind of like I say in, I mention this sometimes in videos, like Tesla, take for an example. Tesla has their robotaxi service, but as Waymo launches in Tokyo and launches in New York soon, and maybe in Florida or wherever other cities they're launching in, that's a good thing for Tesla, right? That's huge news for Tesla because it makes it easier for Tesla to also enter those markets. And you have to imagine a lot of these partnerships are probably not exclusive partnerships, right? People are likely not being tied down. Okay, so what's good for one is good for all of them, essentially, in a market that is this new. Okay, there is no one dominant player in this market. It's not like, when Intel was the dominant GPU, or really, CPU provider, and AMD was coming in to steal their lunch. Okay, that was clearly like to AMD's benefit, and Intel was losing ground. Okay. That's not the case today. They're all basically baby companies. So what's good for one is good for all. And this, I don't even think it's had much of an impact to Rezolve. Now, clearly, there's one of two things happening with Rezolve, okay? One thing for sure is happening is Wall Street doesn't know about the company, okay? So let's chalk it up to this. But number two, Rezolve put out guidance for $500 million in ARR by the end of next year. The stock is trading at less than 3 times sales, or right at about 3 times sales. The company is at about a $1.5 billion market cap. Let's call it 3 times sales. Well, let's be a little generous here, okay? The stock is not even priced for that. I'll tell you now, it's probably priced for half of that number, maybe 250 million, okay? Which would be what? If the stock is trading at 3 times sales, what would that be, 6 times sales, something like that? The stock's probably even priced for less than that, right? So at this point, if Rezolve executes and they do well and their guidance was not, quote unquote, fraudulent, as some people have said, again, I doubt Dan Wagner wants to go to prison. I don't think he'd last too long in prison, okay? there's massive upside in the stock, in my opinion. Okay, now we do want to hear some good news soon. We want a contract. We want another partnership. We want something, okay? There's a lot of reasons why we're probably not hearing about all of these contracts. Dan Wagner said on the earnings call, a lot of them are like $100,000 a year, right? A couple $100,000 a year, not enough to really like put out a press release about. But I think when it comes down to it, not all companies want to explicitly state they're partnering with another company, right? They want to keep optionality open. Again, that's just how it is. Now, a lot of people have talked about the OpenAI agentic commerce. I think OpenAI would love to buy Rezolve. They definitely have the means to do so. And as Rezolve becomes a larger and larger competitor, you could start to see where a buyout starts to, look attractive for whether it's OpenAI or whether it's just Google itself or what have you. But again, it's not one of those situations where you're going to see one company come in and dominate. There is room for many companies. This is a multi-trillion-dollar industry, okay? And with the stock price the way it is, you're really one good news away from seeing an absolute explosion in the stock. Now, what I also found today in a quick little Google McDougal search here, this article from Insider Monkey, probably AI written, maybe not. It says published October 27th, that is today, at 11:01 a.m., so a few hours ago, by Abdul Rahman in Hedge Funds News, okay? This is 13 best AI stocks to buy under $20. Rezolve was number 11, share price $4.44. He says Rezolve is one of the best AI stocks to buy under $20. On October 22nd, Rezolve AI PLC confirmed a series of senior management changes as it seeks to sharpen operational execution and accelerate revenue growth. The company changes will also help enhance the company's leadership in artificial intelligence and digital commerce. Consequentially, it confirmed the appointment of Arthur Yeo as Chief Operating and Financial Officer, tasked with overseeing global operations and finance. Roland Gossage is to assume a new role as Chief Growth Officer, tasked with bridging innovation and market opportunity to ensure the company's product line evolves. Richard Burchill is to take over as Group Finance Director, tasked with enhancing the company's financial performance, reporting, and planning. Crispin Lowry will operate as Chief Revenue Officer, tasked with building a world-class global sales network by energizing regional teams and expanding enterprise reach. It says, quote, Rezolve AI is entering its most exciting chapter yet. These leadership appointments align our organization for scale, discipline, and innovation as we continue to deliver against our growth ambitions. Each of these leaders brings proven capability and deep experience together. They make Rezolve stronger, faster, and more focused than ever, said Dan Wagner, founder and CEO of Rezolve. It says previously on October 13th, Roth MKM reaffirmed its buy rating on the stock. Keep in mind, earnings were on October 1st. Short report, OpenAI, all of the things that people are nervous about happened around earnings, right? So even following that, just about 10 days ago, 14 days ago, 2 weeks ago, Roth MKM reaffirmed its buy rating on the stock, slightly adjusting its price target to $12.50, or from $12.50 to $12.40. They lowered the price target 10 cents. The updated forecast reflects a potential upside of 187.04%, signaling continued confidence in the company's growth prospects. So again, there is a lot of price targets on Rezolve starting to accumulate. The lowest one is $7. The highest one is $15. Even at $7, that's like 70% upside from current levels. Even if you think the lowest price target is like the ceiling for the stock, that's a 70% upside move. If analysts are not talking about competition as a huge factor that is bad for Rezolve, I don't think we should be very concerned about that at this point. And hopefully the arguments that I make a lot of sense to you. Now, even if you want a more generic view on this, I think the markets are about to rally hard in the next 3 months, and a rising tide lifts all boats no matter who they belong to. Okay? I think Rezolve is one of the better boats out there, granted, but even if you think Rezolve is dog shit at this point, which I know some of you guys have said that in the comment section, which is factually not true, but we'll go with it. A rising tide lifts all boats. The stock is trading at dirt cheap valuations. Now, short interest of free float, sitting at about 9.16%. There's not a lot of Wall Street that is nervous about Rezolve. There's not a lot of shorting activity taking place. So, keep that in mind. We did have some interesting option activity recently as well. On October 21st was the last trade we had here, but it was a May 14th, 2026 $15 call for $54,000. So last I checked, $15 per share is far off of $4.87. And again, honestly, you're just one catalyst away from a massive rally in the stock. That is all it's going to take at this point. Okay? That's all you need. That's all we're waiting for. Now, for anyone that's curious, I still have the same position I had before in Rezolve. 14,100 shares in the Robinhood portfolio, plus 1,500 shares via the options positioning, plus 15,000 shares in Public, plus 1,000 shares in Webull, plus 1,300 shares in Thinkorswim. 32,900 shares in total exposure, times that by $4.88. I have total exposure in Rezolve at $160,552. That is, again, when I bought Rezolve because the stock was trading far lower than I thought it was worth. And that case has only been amplified recently, But, hey, if you have a different opinion, let me know down below in the comment section. Let me know what you are doing with your position. But even more so, again, technicals are starting to recover. I think we're going through a strong rally into the end of this year, really with things kicking off on Friday as volatility collapses. And I think a lot of the stocks that have been beaten down recently, like a Rezolve, are going to come soaring back, especially on Friday. Even consider the RSI is at 45, okay? Stock is primed for upside at this point. Now, as far as the press release Rezolve put out, honestly, it's not too exciting. So it's kind of the last thing we're going to cover. It says Rezolve AI will participate in upcoming investor conferences hosted by RBC Capital Markets and Roth Capital Partners this November in New York. Founder and CEO Real Dan Wagner will speak at the RBC Capital Markets, which is interesting. I don't believe RBC has a price target on Rezolve. Roth does. Roth MKM, Roth MKM. But not RBC. Now, last conference we had was from H.C. Wainwright, and following that conference, they raised their price target. That said, ladies and gentlemen, let me know your thoughts on all of this information down below in the comment section. If you guys want to come join the trading community, check that link out down below. But again, as I've said before, nothing has changed. Even to get to a fair valuation on Rezolve relative to other AI stocks, you're talking about the stock hitting anywhere between $15 and $20 per share over the next 3 months. That's a fair value. That would not be like overvalued relative to other AI stocks. That would be, the stock going up like 3 to 4x from here. So, pick your apples at this point, but I'm liking my apple choice in Rezolve. So, apologies for the weird analogies in this video. I think it's the mountains. They're just, they mess up your head a little bit. But that is it, ladies and gentlemen. Enjoy the rest of your day. Check that link out down below in the description of this video if you want to come join the trading community and get involved in the action over there. That's it. Have a great rest of your day, and I will see you in the next one.